Welcome back to your post-game Buckeye Talk. The Ohio State spring game is over. Doug Lesmerises, Nathan Baird, Stephen Means, we're back in our respective homes. We did not record at Ohio Stadium. We watched the game, interviewed people, did some videos, and then we came home. So we're going to get this to you late on Saturday night. It's about 6 p.m. as we sit down to record this. It was a noon kickoff at Ohio Stadium. We're going to run through what we saw, what we thought, what Ryan Day and Devin Brown and Kyle McCord and Denzel Burke said about it afterward. But we'll start very quickly with a couple little nuggets. 2 commits, Stephen Means. One during?
Right before. Literally
right before.
2 minutes before kickoff.
One right before kickoff, and then one in the last half hour here on Saturday evening, adding to the 2024 class for the Buckeyes. Stephen, who are they?
Yeah, the first one who happened literally 2 minutes before kickoff is Max LeBlanc, the number 270 player, the number 13 tight end in the country, and he gives Keenan Bailey his first commit as a position coach. Something they had been working at for a little bit here in an offer in January, and things have been kind of trending towards Ohio State. Then it very much picked up in a major way, really in the last 48 hours, really since we recorded that the recruiting momentum pod on Thursday, even when we recorded that, maybe a couple hours after we did that, momentum started to pick up. And then he kind of hinted at a commitment was coming soon. And obviously it popped on the spring day. So Keenan Bailey gets his first commit. Ohio State's been chipping at this, trying to get a 2 tight end class for a couple of cycles now. And they've come close. In 2022, they had Benji Gosnell and Bennett Christian, and then Gosnell obviously ended up flipping to Virginia Tech. And then last class they had Ty Lockwood early, and then came back with Jelani Thurman, and then obviously Ty Lockwood ends up flipping to Alabama once he gets that dream offer. So now that goal has shifted into the 2024 cycle. You get LeBlanc in early, and so that gives some time here to see if they can maybe accomplish that 2 tight end recruiting class. So it starts there, and then the second guy, his name is Sam Williams-Dixon. He recently just transferred to Pickerington North High School, but he's been in Ohio for a while now. Pick North, the same high school that Jack Sawyer comes from. The number 677 player, the number 79 athlete. This is another one of those. We're going to take some of these lower Ohio rated guys early, but also it's just you need depth in that running back room. This is the guy who might end up playing running back, who also might end up playing wide receiver here. So he's got some options there. But if he ends up in the running back room, since Tony Alford's been recruiting him, that room might lose 3 guys after this season. And with Mayan Williams and Chip Trainum both being, upperclassmen who are coming into their last years of eligibility, senior years at least, while Travion Henderson's could be a 3-and-done player. So you might lose up to 3 guys. So you need to bring 2.5 in. This is James People was the one. Sam Williams-Dixon is your half because he might not end up in the room. And then obviously they'll keep continuing to recruit maybe some more national guys to get that second pure running back in that class. So one guy adds some depth to a room who's going to need it after this season potentially, and the other guy gets Keenan Bailey on the board as a position coach.
And this is a shift, right? This is an Ohio guy rated in the 600s. This is not even come in the summer and earn an offer.
Yep.
This is April, and you're getting the commit. You're taking the commitment. Now, this is different, right, Stephen? We're just going to lock it in. We like him, lock it in.
Yeah, and they'll still probably require him to camp. We saw it with Will Smith Jr., where he was committed, but he came to every single day camp last summer. Probably something similar here, but instead of coming to camp trying to fight for an offer, you're coming to camp to work on your skills, and you're coming to camp to work on stuff and just be in the program and have all the facilities to your advantage. So maybe it kind of speeds up your development process a little bit, the way we saw with Will Smith, or he climbed up the rankings a little bit, and let's see if there's going to be a payoff once he gets on the campus. But, yeah, this is a shift. Guys like this weren't getting offers until they came and camped in June because they could evaluate them longer. Ohio State doesn't want to overthink it as much with these guys, so instead you get them on campus, see if you like what they look like physically in January, then you offer them, and then see where it takes you over the next 6 months.
And again, a reaction to NIL. I think of hey, we have these kids who want to be Buckeyes. We're probably not knee deep in NIL conversations with this. We think they're good players. We'll take them. So this is a change. And I will say, I was trying to think of the Luz, as a lay. I'm a plural. LeBlanc he's a singular. So always on the alert for the French, thing at the front.
So
and then for some reason. Because then Keenan Bailey gave him a laboom.
He did.
And I was like, I'm in favor of a laboom. I would be a laboom. And then for some reason, I thought in my head, he's from Montreal. That's exactly, I Frenchified him. It would be like if someone did that to me. It's like, I'm not from Montreal. So I apologize. Where's he from? Tennessee, right? LeBlanc?
Chattanooga, Tennessee. That is correct.
Okay. Sorry, not Montreal. His people probably, you get
I mean,
so
yeah, somewhere along the way, but he himself is from America.
Well, my wife and I always talk about this. When I was covering Major League Baseball and I was covering the Philadelphia Phillies, they did sign a relief pitcher one off season. They signed Real Cormier, who was actually French, and spoke with a French accent. And he hurt his arm right when he got to spring training. And in his French accent, he said, I come to a new team and this crap happens. And so he didn't say crap, though. He said the other thing. So when something happens in our house that doesn't go well, my wife and I will say, like, if the refrigerator breaks, it's like, I come to a new team and this crap happens. So I don't think Max LeBlanc's going to talk like that. Okay, let's talk about Kyle McCord, a little bit of Tristan Gebbia. We have a survey out to our tech subscribers. We sent a bunch of texts during the day. The thing we have to talk about first is what we think what Kyle McCord did on Saturday did for the Ohio State quarterback battle. So I will not give the results yet of our texter survey because I just sent it out and I'm going to let some more answers pour in. But Nathan, I'm going to ask us some of these questions for us to give what we thought of the quarterbacks, and I think we all have to go back and rewatch it. You thought the Ohio State quarterback play from Kyle McCord and Tristan Gebbia on Saturday was blank, Nathan. Here were the choices. Great, good, okay, not very good. Nathan, how would you have voted in the poll I sent to the texters?
I think okay. I think I would have said okay. Now, there are some reasons for that we'll get into, that some things were maybe a little bit out of their control, but I think okay is where I would put.
Stephen, what would you have voted there? Great, good, okay, or not very good?
Yeah, I probably would have voted okay as well, but in a optimistic way, I think.
Yeah, I would vote okay as well. And at the moment, I'll wait. We still want people to vote. Okay is the overwhelming choice. So it's the second worst, but it's the overwhelming choice right now. So that's what you thought. And now what does it mean? How does it affect this Ohio State quarterback battle? So let me ask this. Overall, Nathan, this is a question for the texters. How was your overall view of the Ohio State quarterback position affected by the spring game? So I gave two options of it didn't change. So it didn't change, but I think Ohio State will have a good quarterback in the fall. It didn't change, but I'm at least somewhat concerned about Ohio State quarterback play in the fall. So whatever I thought before, what happened Saturday didn't affect it. It's just, were you more optimistic or more pessimistic before? The game made you think I'm less confident that Ohio State will wind up with a good quarterback, or the game made you think I am more confident that Ohio State will wind up with a good quarterback. Nathan, first of all, would you vote for one of the didn't changes, or would you vote for something that did change, you got less or more confident?
I would vote for didn't change.
Stephen, would you vote for didn't change, or would you be changed by something Saturday?
Yeah, it didn't change.
Okay. I think I would vote didn't change, but I would be open to not voting didn't change. So Nathan, then if you're didn't change, are you didn't change? I think they'll have good quarterbacks, or didn't change. I'm a little concerned about the quarterback play this fall.
I'm leaning didn't change and feel like they'll have good quarterback play. It's so hard to evaluate what we saw today, because I'm the one who's been kind of preaching these last few weeks, and I've been writing about it in a couple different ways, about how it's not really a Kyle McCord, Devin Brown competition. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's going to get picked to be the starting quarterback. It's whether or not they play at the Ohio State standard. And it's very hard to judge that Ohio State standard right now, because the offensive line is not the Ohio State standard and the receiving core is not the Ohio State standard. So I think that we've seen enough good things from McCord and Brown at times that they will figure something out for this fall that gets the lion's share of the success they want to have. Does it mean that now then we can start a whole nother conversation about are we judging that based on national championship standard, or are we just saying the quarterbacks won't be bad? That's two different standards.
Well, I think the only standard is, I think the two standards are this. Can a quarterback be a big part of you winning a national championship, or can the quarterback at least make sure they don't keep you from winning a national championship, right? Those are the only two discussions, because it has to be a national championship / beat Michigan discussion, right? It is a high level, high standard thing. So are you a leader in that, or are you along for the ride, but you're still doing your job, right? Those are the only two acceptable outcomes.
Right.
And so then the idea is there any way you could wind up with neither of those outcomes? But among those first two, Nathan, to what you're saying, those are very different things, but Marvin Harrison, healthy run game, JT Tuimoloau, Denzel Burke, it increases the chances of the one where the quarterback's more along for the ride being enough.
Right. And then you've also got on top of that, if this defense keeps improving, then the pressure on this offense comes down. There was a lot of pressure on this offense in the most important games of the year last year. They like to be the team that's like creating the pressure with their offense, and the opposite was happening against Michigan and Georgia. They were the ones who had to just kind of keep responding relentlessly and couldn't to the extent of to the level that needed to win. But the other thing I would mention though is like, then if this offensive line doesn't take a step forward, that's going to affect the quarterback play. It's going to affect the offense as a whole. So that's the other thing that has to be remembered here, that there's a level to which the quarterback can't just overcome a big deficiency like that.
So, Stephen, the idea that the general vibe of this is maybe, it was fine. It was okay. Okay is the word that people vote on. It was okay. Didn't really change my mind about anything. Like, we'll see you in August. It's okay. Well, I'm not worried, but it's okay. I mean, it was. Let's be honest. I thought that was a bad spring game. I thought it was not very fun. Yeah. I am rethinking my, hey, take your kids to the spring game. I thought that was bad. The weather was beautiful. I did not think it was fun. No. Now, if Devin Brown had played and you automatically have how's this guy look? Oh, how's this guy look? It's automatically more interesting and more exciting. Now, as we said, hey, you push pause on the quarterback battle button. I don't think it changed the face of that battle, but like they need to jazz it up again. We were talking about Urban made it. Urban was the ringmaster of the circus. He really leaned into that, and they would have the students come and race, and then the fastest student would race against the team, and they had a 100-yard dash one time with Ezekiel Elliott and Braxton Miller and Kerry Combs all running, and they had a Troy Smith and Cardale Jones and JT Barrett were like throwing football. Like, it wasn't fun, and it wasn't interesting, and I thought the play calling was boring. And then, like a lot of times, anytime they try to take shots down the field, either the quarterbacks missed it, or before they could throw it, they got enough pressure. The quarterbacks were running. Like, running non-live quarterbacks is boring.
There's nothing more boring.
Hey, the quarterback got out of the pocket, and now he's escaping. But did he get out of the pocket? Well, the guy touched his hip. He would have been sacked. Oh, he's running, but nobody can tackle him. Steve and I was bored. Like, that's not the main thing, but like to the 75,000 people who paid $7 for their ticket, and it was a beautiful day. Maybe a little cha-cha-cha in there, man. But also, like, super high-level quarterback play would have done that, and it wasn't that. It was like very much like a meh. Like, all the answers that we're talking about so far, like, nobody's worried, but it's kind of like, I thought it was a meh day, Stephen, across the board.
Ran the ball 47 times. That's way too many times when you're trying to just keep people's attention. Like, I get it. You got stuff to work on. But you had 14 practices to work on that stuff. This is for the fans. Air it out. Have some fun with it. Sit the guys down who are going to embarrass your offensive line, and let's have some fun with this thing. I think they need to find a way to engage the fans again, because nothing – I get it. You're not going to play your superstars, which is what everybody wants. Everybody wants to see Marvin Harrison catch a freaky pass. And that's not going to happen because he's going to play 2 series, and then they're going to sit him down to keep him out of harm's way. And Julian Fleming and Emeka Buka were already not playing. And Travion Henderson's your home run hitting running back, but he's already not playing. All the reasons that, like, all the cool things that could happen in a football game that you probably would come to the spring game to see weren't really available to Ohio State today for whatever reason you want to name. So that takes some of the fun aspect out of it. But then other than that, like, it was no different than us if we were just in the Woody watching practice, is what it felt like.
What do you mean they didn't play their superstars? They brought in Archie Griffin. He ran for a touchdown.
Which was like, I looked at Doug and I went, why is this happening again? Like, I don't know. Like, I get cool moment. Yay, Archie Griffin, legend, all that stuff. Like, I'm not. Is there a reason why we're doing that right now? But anyway, the quarterback thing, though, whether it's, first of all, I'm glad that we got to see so much practice this year, because what if that was the first time we had really got to see them in an extended amount of period? We might be freaking out a little bit because, like, the offensive line is in trouble. Kyle McCord didn't look good. But because we already knew the offensive line had been struggling and the quarterbacks had been good, but not, no one had really claimed the job yet, I think it took some of the initial reaction we would have had to some of the stuff that was happening today. But I just think overall, I didn't see anything in any practice or today that did make me feel like the quarterback play is going to be all right by the time we get to fall, even if it's still going to take some time to get there. I just saw normal, neither one of Kyle was really only done this once, and it was 2 years ago against Akron, so what do you even make of that? So there was going to be some weirdness, along with the fact that, yes, he was running for his life sometimes, even though they actually couldn't tackle him.
So here's the thing.
There are a couple reasons. Let me drop a stat on you, Nathan, real quick.
Yep.
Talking about how much they ran, Jebbia and Kyle McCord combined ran it 14 times.
Yeah.
I think McCord had at least one run on a read keep, right? But most of those are scrambles. So that's like, well, why did they run? Well, it's because either nobody was open or they got pressured. So that's 20% of their dropbacks. So they threw the ball combined, those two guys, 58 times, and they ran it 14. So 20% of their dropbacks, Nathan, they wound up running because like something went wrong. So like that was part of it too. There was like a section where like I think Tristan Jebbia, who's the third string quarterback, who is here as a coach as much as he is as a player, former starter at Oregon State, might be the new example of what Ohio State wants like their fourth guy in the quarterback room to be, because Lincoln Keenholz is going to get here this offseason. He's not supposed to play. So he was playing today because he was the 2 today because Devin Brown didn't play. There was a section where he like ran it almost like on 3 straight times. Like, this is not what we were here for. So Nathan, that point, the fact that the quarterbacks did run it so much is part of what we're talking about, because some other things around them weren't working.
I think there were a couple of designed runs or re-keep options, a couple that McCord kept the ball on, and it made me think that means that's going to be a bigger piece of this offense this fall, regardless of who wins this job, that they will ask him to do that more than they did Stroud. Not as much as they did Fields, but more than they did Stroud. But you're right. Like, I even texted at one point, like my early text after the first few series was something along the lines of, the offensive line's doing all right. It's kind of holding its own after getting beat up. And then literally the next play, McCord stepped up into the pocket and was trying to escape, but he ran by Caden Curry, so they gave him a sack there. Into the first quarter, started the second quarter, next play, Kenyatta Jackson gets through and gets a legit sack. So they definitely had some of those issues that keeps clouding the quarterback analysis. The stat I was going to drop on you, I just wanted to read this because I looked it up, and I thought it was maybe what you were going to get to as far as why you were hesitating between how you feel about the quarterback play. This is the second paragraph of my post-game story from 2021 from the spring game. Stroud led a pair of first-half touchdown drives while he, Jack Miller, and Kyle McCord took snaps with both Team Brutus and Team Buckeye. I wonder why they picked Brutus and Buckeye between Scarlet and Gray when it doesn't really matter. Anyway, he led another to begin the second half, so that's 3 touchdown drives. And for the day, he completed 16 of 22 attempts for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns, which kind of ends up looking like what C.J. Stroud did for his career. Like, you're getting up towards like 9 yards per attempt. He was actually better than that for a lot of his career. And it just felt different that day. And there's other circumstances. There's other context for that. Who was on his offensive line, which receivers were available, that sort of thing. But I see where you might be coming from, as like, we were open as much as we came out of the news Wednesday and said, this press pause on everything. Nobody's going to win this job on Saturday. We were also open to Kyle McCord being the only one who has the chance, coming out and being like, no, like this is what it is, and putting it down. And that didn't really happen the way I think it sort of did with Stroud in 21.
So we don't want to overreact to this, right? We were sort of saying a couple podcasts ago, because Ryan Day was saying like, oh man, after the 2019 spring game, I was like, oh, do we have a quarterback? And we're like, come on, it's Justin Fields. And Steven, you were like, no, he did struggle that day. 4 of 13 for 131 yards, Justin Fields in the 2019 spring game, right? So it's just raw stats. Matthew Baldwin that day, 20 of 36, 246, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. 2018 spring game, Dwayne Haskins, 9 of 19 for 120, 2 touchdowns. Joe Burrow, 15 of 22, 238, 2 touchdowns, but Dwayne was ahead. Dwayne won the job. CJ in 2021 was better than Kyle McCord was in 2023 on Saturday. So I want to get to the specific question, which is where we think this battle is, both what we think and what Ryan Day said. And we'll do that next on Buckeye Talk. So we're not overreacting, we're analyzing. So take everything we say and just put the veneer of it's the spring game in front of everything we say. It's the spring game, and now we're going to have this conversation. Question I asked, and we can start revealing these text or answers because we're getting some more responses here. What is closer to your view of the Ohio State quarterback battle coming out of the spring game? These were the 3 choices I gave. It's Kyle McCord. You're basically ready to give him the job. It's still split. It's an open battle that should continue going into preseason camp. Or I really want to see Devin Brown back healthy. You're thinking Brown could be the guy, right? So you can't know about Devin Brown, but maybe Saturday made you more curious about, okay, if now we know that's how Kyle McCord looked in this situation, I really want to know what Devin Brown would look like in that situation. So, Steven, what would you pick of those? You know what? I think it's McCord. Oh, no, it's still open. Or, man, I really want to see Devin Brown now. Where are you?
I think I'm at still split pretty firmly. Just because, Kyle didn't do anything today to just snatch it.
So that's what do you think? What do you, Steven, means? What would you vote?
Yeah, I would vote it's still split.
You would vote
right
it's
now.
Still split? Okay.
Yeah, very firmly, too.
Why that? You're still wide. Like, to you, is it almost more wide open now than it was when spring football started? If we maybe presumed McCord was the front runner coming in, would you almost have it back to even?
Probably. I'd maybe go 51 Kyle, 49 Devin, but pretty even. And I think because Kyle didn't do anything today that made you go, that's your starting quarterback. He didn't do anything that made it seem like he shouldn't be either, but he just didn't, he didn't claim the job in a way that maybe he could have if you really want to think about it that way. While really want to see Devin Brown healthy, you're thinking he can be the guy. I know you didn't write it this way when you made the survey, but it feels very, very similar to CJ Stroud after the Tulsa game. I want to see Kyle McCord. It gives me that feeling of the guy we haven't seen yet is better, even if you don't have a good reason why. I just think he's the guy because I didn't like what I saw from this guy. And I do think for anybody who is thinking that way, breathe. Because this is what it looks like when guys don't have experience. And as we saw with CJ Stroud, as they grow into it, regardless of if it's Devin or Kyle, as they grow into it, it does get better. And eventually that light comes on and we're off and running.
So I think that's a really good comparison to the Stroud McCord thing, because when you have that, it's really more about the first guy.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm not saying the first guy isn't it, but I'm saying I would like to see other options, right? They're bringing out the dresses, bringing out your prom dress, and it's like, do you want to buy this one? It's like, I think I like it, but you know what? Could you bring a few more out? So that's where I certainly was after the first several games in 2021. I wanted to see another dress. And then it turns out they took the first dress and they took it in the back and they fixed the strap and they brought it back out and it was like, oh, no, it is that dress. It just, the strap was a little ripped. And once you fix that, now that's the one I want. So, Nathan, where would you vote on this? It's McCord. You're still wide open split, or man, I want to see Devin Brown.
Well, first of all, just kudos to your high school in suburban Philadelphia that was very progressive, apparently, back in the day, as far as your prom
Oh,
decision.
no. I am not suburban Philadelphia. Please don't let Landis think that I have ever claimed that I'm suburban Philadelphia.
Oh, that's right. You were
He
more
will rip
Penn
my arms
State-ish
off.
area, right? You were more.
No, you can smell. No. I'm just. I'm from a farm town. So yeah.
Okay.
No, but I like prom. I'm surrounded by prom dresses. It's prom dress season right now in the Lamar's household. So.
Yeah, like I think so. The Stroud McCord 2021 comparison is interesting because the reason we were saying those things, there were people on this podcast saying those things, at least two people saying those things, was because Stroud
No,
wasn't
I already
playing
said
well.
that. You don't have to act like I didn't claim it. I claimed it before you said that. You know, I'm like, oh, Doug, let's not forget Doug was doubting C.J. Stroud. I said I was doubting him.
Me too.
Yeah,
me too.
He was like
I said at least two.
He was subliminally also planting his flag.
But anyway, but the reason we did that is because he wasn't playing well. But then we did see the other guy, and that helped clear things up. We saw McCord.
Yes.
We saw the difference, and then we saw a healthy CJ Stroud, and then we really saw the difference, and it was off and running. So that is why I think still split is got to be the answer, because I think I'm with like Steven. I may even be farther in the edge that I would give McCord in this right now. He's just been, I feel like, more consistent with his touch, with his reading this spring when we've seen them. I've seen less throws from him than or more throws from Devin Brown where I'm like, whoa, where was that going? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, not that it's an epidemic of it, but more of them. So like, I think McCord still has an edge here as far as actually winning the battle. But again, to me, the question is, winning the battle is one thing. Now, are you better than Sam Hartman, whoever's quarterbacking Notre Dame, when you have to go into that stadium for that game? Are you better than whatever Luke Fickell's cooking up at Wisconsin right now? Are you better than J.J. McCarthy, who's already showed he was better than C.J. Stroud as far as winning the game when they played head-to-head last year, although it's not all on Stroud. So, like, that's the second standard. Like, I'm almost like we have to follow the quarterback battle of this. Someday they will say to one of these guys, you are starting September 2nd. But then a whole nother evaluation starts as to whether or not this is an Ohio State quarterback or not. That I can tell you right now. Like, neither of these guys are at that level right now. But neither was C.J. Stroud early in 2021. Not consistently.
So to the point that Steven brought up a couple months ago, I think now, that I'm always nervous about the new quarterback. I always think that it's like a 9-3, right? Bench C.J. Stroud. Yeah. I think Quinn Ewers is going to be the starter by the end of the year. Yeah. Every time there's a new quarterback, I'm like, well, that's it. It's been a nice run. Congratulations on Ohio State. You know, not having a bad stretch, really, you know, since the 30s, but it's coming to an end now. I do get like, okay, I want to see the other dress. I would vote I want to see Devin Brown. I would not vote split. I'm further towards like, I want to see the other dress. And maybe the other dress is gonna have too many sequins. Although, really, can you ever have too many sequins? I would have nothing but sequins if I was buying a prom dress.
This sounds like a conversation that's been had in your household in the past week and a half. We're talking about sequins now.
No, now the sequins are more expensive. That I'm not pro. I'm like, what's the cheapest sequiny dress that you can get? So that's what I want, but I want to see it. I want to see it. And there was a world where I would be close to buying. I was open to buying today. And I come away wanting to see another dress. And that's some about Devin Brown. I just want to see what it looks like. And I wish we could have seen it because we're going to get to soon the receivers who didn't play, the tackle situation, the contributing factors that maybe this was not all-American quarterback play on Saturday. We know they're young, but there's other things happening. I would have wanted to see Devin Brown in those same circumstances, right? But here's the thing that's hard. And again, I think Joe Burrow, poor Joe Burrow, man, that guy, whatever happened to that guy? It made me think to myself as I run through these stats, the level that Joe Burrow played at in 2018 to not win the job. If Joe Burrow had played today and looked like Joe Burrow looked in 2018, we'd be like, the door is slammed shut.
Mm.
It's Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's the starter. Now, Joe Burrow was in year 4. Kyle McCord's in year 3. Dwayne Haskins was in year 3. Dwayne Haskins had played more than Kyle McCord has, right? It's not the same. But also, like the point you made, Nathan, right? CJ comes out in 2021, leads multiple touchdown drives. A point that you made earlier today, Nathan. First team offense didn't score a touchdown until the fourth quarter, right? All these other things happening, right? There, as much as we can run through stats and say, hey, there's lots of times when quarterbacks don't look great in the spring. Joe Burrow, they would be letting the air out of his tires in the parking lot. They would put up border patrol. If he tried to get to Louisiana, if he had played today and was like, guys, I don't know, they'd be like, oh, no, it's you. Now, I'm not saying that's what the expectation was, Nathan. That's not, nobody had an expectation. That's what Kyle McCord had. I'm just saying the context of quarterback play, quarterback battles we have seen in the spring somewhat recently, and guys progress differently. Guys are different ages. But the bottom line is 2018, there were 2 guys vying to be the starting quarterback in 4 months. There are guys vying to be the starting quarterback in 4 months. The effort that did not get Joe Burrow over the top in 2018 would have slammed the door shut on the competition today. That doesn't mean Ohio State can't win a national championship. It doesn't mean that Kyle McCord isn't going to be the starting quarterback and isn't going to be very good. I'm just saying they got some ground to make up compared to, I think, where they were in 18 coming out of spring, where they were in 21 coming out of spring. Even Justin Fields, 4 of 13 in 2019. And again, Stephen, you remember it. I don't remember it very well. I remember, though, sometimes you put the ball in Justin Fields' hands and it's like, well, that looks pretty magical. Like, when in doubt, Justin, be magical. Even that. I thought a little bit today when Kyle McCord was running, I was applying my CJ Stroud standard of like behind the line of scrimmage, dangerous. Once he's past the line of scrimmage, I'm not interested. Right? I thought he had a zone keep that I was like, okay, that took a while to get to the outside. I don't think it's his game. That's fine. I actually thought Tristan Gebbia scooted a little bit. I'm not trying to induce panic. I will say sometimes I'm on alert. I'm not on alert. But Nathan, sometimes at this point in the year, you're ready to buy the dress. We have to admit that because, and again, from strength, from weakness, 18, I think you take either dress. Right? It wasn't that you were unsure. It was that you liked 2 and you didn't know which one to buy. I'm not ready to buy today, Nathan. So I think we need to express that. We need to express that to fans. Don't be panicked. I think Ohio State's one of the 4 best teams in the country, but I don't think this is over, Nathan.
No, that's why I think this is a little bit of a. I mean, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, I think it's still split. I don't know. I guess maybe I don't see a huge distinction between those 2 answers because I haven't seen anything this spring that makes me think Brown is definitely better right now. Right? That's kind of what this third answer alludes to.
No, but I think the thing I'm trying to imply is how eager you are for that next dress to come out. Is it like, oh, I'm not sure, you know what, I can't make up my mind? Or is it like, no, I need to see more dresses? Those are 2 different things to me.
We did see this dress all spring. We saw both dresses all spring.
I know, and I really want to, well, we did. I want it back out, though. I want to hang them on the rack next to each other. All right, we'll end the podcast.
I guess
the greater point you're making is whether or not McCord impressed you enough today. That's really the greater point you're making.
That's true. And I was not impressed enough. Yes.
Is not being ready to buy a bad thing?
When the other option is ready to buy, it's not bad, but I'd rather be ready to buy. Or I'd rather say I'm happy to buy either one. I mean, of course you would. I mean, I would. It's not disastrous that you're not, but given the choice, I'd rather be ready to buy.
Okay. I
don't want to induce panic.
No,
I don't want to induce panic.
I don't think you're inducing. Joe Burrow is so hard to gauge because his I understand. Yes, you wanted either option, but then like both options did get the start in 2018 somewhere, and they were drastically different products. Like his career trajectory is just so wild that I don't even know if he's applicable in this situation the way that I think sometimes we like to apply it. I think the idea of him and Dwayne Haskins battling is, but the end result of like you wanted Joe Burrow or Dwayne Haskins, you were happy with both. While I think you're telling the truth there, but also it was very clear 6 months into it that like, oh, OSU clearly made the right choice in this decision. And then things changed at LSU that allowed Joe Burrow to become what he is today. So I just don't know if that's applicable here in the same way of saying you were ready to buy with both of those guys. I think not being ready to buy might be better in this situation than it was in 2018 because of what the quarterback has, how the quarterback room has evolved over the last 5 years. That has built in a little bit of benefit of the doubt that you're going to get good quarterback play either way. That not being ready to buy. Okay, we're pretty much where we are anyway with how Ryan Day has picked his quarterbacks, where we're not expecting him to pick one until the third week of fall camp. So that's why, like, when you're saying not ready to buy, I don't see that as a bad thing. I see it as a good thing because it's been the typical way that Ryan Day's gone about this.
The other thing about not hitting the panic button is the questions I've been trying to ask Ryan Day these last couple of weeks have gotten more to the point of, but what do you see as the ceiling? What do you see that Ohio State standard? What are you seeing from these guys relative to that? I don't care which one wins. What are you seeing relative to that thing that we're going to eventually be judging them against? And today I asked him because it was something you and I talked about during the game when he made a throw from like one of the far hashes, like the right hash to the left sideline. And he did it later in the game too. And the first time we were talking about it and you said, oh, like Justin Fields, like made a big career out of that at Ohio State, which is true. And so I wanted to ask Day about that and just about how that's emblematic of what talent they have. And like, long story short, he said, like, he definitely has the skill set, referring to Kyle McCord. He wasn't evaluating Devin Brown at the time. So I think in the case of both of these guys, this is why they brought them here. They evaluate these guys top to bottom. They've been developing them for 3 years. In the case of Kyle McCord, they think the package is there, but it's not finished. It's an ongoing project where it's relative to or separate from whoever wins the job. The project to build them into the Ohio State standard is still ongoing. So by that very nature, the competition has to keep ongoing, continue ongoing.
So let's talk about then what they said today, because we've been talking about it all spring. Nathan, I know Steven and I were back talking to some players while Ryan Day was finishing up. What did you get as the overall vibe from Ryan Day? Let's start with about what he thought about Kyle McCord on Saturday. You just said he had the skill set. What else did Ryan Day say about Kyle McCord?
I think that just the long story short is that today was an extension of what the entire spring was like in relation to Kyle McCord, which is that they saw some things that they really liked. They saw flashes of this thing that I'm talking about that they want to see and that needs to be there on a consistent basis in order to replicate the kind of seasons and careers that the guys who came before him have had. But it's inconsistent, and there were other things that they, even without looking at the film, they already knew that they wanted back, that they think needs to be better. And there wasn't a follow-up that got into the specifics of whether that's on reads, whether that is on a particular decision or the way he threw a ball. We definitely saw him, a couple times almost get intercepted, even though he didn't actually get intercepted. But, I don't think any Ohio State, unless you're playing in the Northwestern wind tunnel, I don't think any Ohio State quarterback comes out of any scenario, even against the first string defense, where you only complete 50% of your passes and you average 5.4 yards per attempt, and you think that was a successful day. I don't think Kyle McCord probably thinks it was a successful day. And there's, again, those factors that were out of his control did play into it a little bit. But the other question I asked Kyle McCord was something else we've been talking about how you have to sort of rise to the occasion regardless of having the optimum lineup out there or whether the defense has that advantage on you. And he agreed with that that's not what he should be judged by. He should be judged by whether or not they moved the ball and got touchdowns. And they didn't for a long stretch of this game. In fact, 3 and outs were pretty common with this first string offense today.
Yeah, they were. They scored for the game. They scored 4 touchdowns. Chip Trainum had a 65-yard run where basically the defense didn't fit gaps and he got down the sideline. Archie Griffin, they gave the ball to Archie Griffin. It's in the box score. He's 68 years old. They did a special thing. I think they were trying to find something viral to get on SportsCenter, and this is what they came up with. It's fine. He's a legend. He's Archie Griffin. He can do whatever he wants. He had a 25-yard touchdown run. Then McCord had a nice deep ball, 37-yard touchdown to Carnell Tate, and then Jebbia had a touchdown to Noah Rogers on a slant over the middle where he broke like 3 tackles and then ran away from everybody for a 57-yard touchdown. Those were your 4 touchdowns. Well, one, they didn't try to tackle the 68-year-old guy. They had 3 legitimate touchdowns in the game, and they didn't move it consistently. They didn't get in great rhythms a lot of the time. In the end, and I think this had to be asked, and both of them said, right, Stephen, they're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. So you got to just double check on that. And that is very different from the Haskins-Burrow battle. We've talked about that all spring. They've said that previously. They both said it again now. So the main thing that's different from 18 is there was an urgency in 18 to the situation that has never applied here and still doesn't. And I think everybody would be absolutely stunned if somebody left. So that means you take this into August. Devin Brown said he's on a 4-week timetable. He did have his right pinky wrapped. He was like holding it against his body all pregame and during the game. I did see him lightly shake hands with somebody, so it wasn't like he didn't let anyone touch his hand. But that's a broken finger or whatever finger. He had a procedure. I think you normally call that a surgery to fix his finger. Out for a month, not a huge deal. He said he was disappointed that he didn't get to compete. But he said, I got 10 practices in, so I think I got to show what I needed to show. So, I do think, Stephen, that's important that if we were coming out of here and somebody was giving any indication on or off the record that they might be out of here, we'd be in a very different place. But it feels like they have 2 high recruits who are going to keep battling into August. And the way things have shaped out so far, it feels like we all believe this will continue to be a battle into August. But at least they're both going to be here.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't have been 100% shocked if part of me wouldn't have been shocked if it felt like Kyle McCord, if he didn't have an answer now, he wanted to be out the door. And it's not that putting more of that on him than Devin Brown. It's just he's been here for 3 years, and we do live in a different world when it comes to quarterbacks. And saying that Kyle McCord is going to be somebody's starting quarterback this fall, whether it's here or somewhere else, I just don't feel like it's that off-brand. So when he says it, I feel like it does have a little bit more oomph behind it than it does with Devin Brown, because if Devin doesn't win the job and he's just sitting behind Kyle, he potentially might be on the same timeline as Kyle McCord, where he doesn't get on the field until year 3, which is perfectly fine. So I felt it was a big deal that Kyle McCord has stood on that multiple times now, that he has kind of shot down the idea that he might be out the door if he doesn't win the job.
We didn't get as much quarterback information as we should have because it was a dual interview at the podium up front. And the sports information director asked the media, hey, do you want them together at the podium or do you want to send one of them to a back table? And the media allowed the double interview to take place. And I was not there when the question was asked. And so then when the interview ended, I yelled at everybody in the media of how did we let this happen? Because you have to split them up so you can talk to them separately and get more honest answers. So they're not talking about competing against each other while standing 8 inches from each other. I said, imagine in 2018 if we had Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow standing next to each other talking about this battle. So the other thing is then the guy, 50% of the time you're standing there not talking. So I do, Nathan, I was yelling at people. I was yelling. I'm flabbergasted that this happened. I think we failed the Ohio State fans as a beat pack to allow it to happen, that we did not stand up and say, no, you must split them up so we can have 2 separate simultaneous interviews. And if we allowed it to happen so that the TV cameras could get a nice little 2-shot of the quarterbacks, then we're all dead. Because if we're just going to give in to TV cameras, we may as well just stop. Because TV cameras are for sound bites and journalists are for information. And we did not get as much information from the quarterbacks as we should have. And the fans need to know that, Nathan. Am I making too big of a deal of this? You can say that I am.
Well, no. You're probably making too big of a deal for the audience. You didn't make too big of a deal of it in the time. I wasn't paying attention enough. I was distracted by other things. I didn't realize what was happening until it was happening. That's just something but you're right. And we might have gotten some more insight by getting them separately and getting them to talk maybe a little bit more openly about especially the mentality that they face now, because like clearly, like I have felt before, I felt this way, especially when Quinn Ewers was coming, that McCord was in a really tough spot at that time, because it was like, well, they're dropping this guy in over the top of you, and you got Stroud still here, so like you're getting kind of squeezed, but if you stay and you win the job, you're Ohio State starting quarterback. And it's kind of still the same thing. It's like we perceive a lead here, and if he takes it through and wins the job this fall, you're Ohio State starting quarterback. If you don't, now you're a third-year guy who's not starting, and you're always one snap away from being Ohio State starting quarterback. But it's a tough spot to be in. And I think for both families, I think as a quarterback, I think that's something that you have to almost just like prepare yourself for. Especially if you're coming to Ohio State, you're going to have to deal with that a little bit. I want to throw something in real quick, though. Since I mentioned Stroud's numbers before, McCord in the 2021 spring game, according to what I wrote that day, 12 of 17 for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. So considerably better for him that day, although I think those are different than the numbers
what
you
the
had.
box score said.
Yeah.
I was looking at old box scores.
Yeah.
That was what I wrote from that day. And I think a lot of that came in the scrimmage portion after halftime. So maybe they kept the stats differently. I don't know. But so my point being that I think that a lot of that production came not against a first string defense like what he was playing against on every single snap today. But that's what he's going to have to face on every single snap once he's a starter. So, but just for the sake of fairness, I wanted to throw that in there.
And just in the name of, as we started this, it's the spring game. Justin Fields, 4 of 13. Ryan Day goes home at the end of spring 2019 and says to himself, I don't know if we have a quarterback. And then that quarterback leads them to an undefeated regular season as a Heisman finalist. So that's how you can feel in the spring sometimes. And there were extraneous circumstances that affected how the offense looked. We want to talk about those things. We want to talk about the defense. We'll do that next on Buckeye Talk. All right, let's start with the tackles. Josh Fryer was a starting left tackle. They definitely played 4 offensive linemen as starters. Josh Fryer at left tackle, Donovan Jackson at left guard, Carson Hinsman at center, and Matthew Jones at right guard. They rotated at right tackle. Zen Michalski started with the ones. The second series with the ones was Tegra Shabola. They alternated between the ones and the twos all day. That is a battle that I think everybody should assume goes down to the last day of preseason camp. Fryer and Hinsman are certainly less locked in as starters than Jackson and Jones, because Jackson and Jones are returning starters, but they were treated basically the same. Like, other guys worked in a little bit with the ones. Enoch Vamahi and Toby Wilson at right guard, Vic Cutler at center, Ben Chrisman at left guard, and George Fitzpatrick at left tackle, but they did not work in anywhere close to equally with those 4 starters on the offensive line. So, Nathan, you and I were commenting, as you said, you texted about it. It felt like early on the tackles were doing okay, and they were running the offense a bit, and then all of a sudden, it wasn't just the tackles. It felt like the defensive line was getting the backfield on a regular basis. Did Ryan Day say inconsistent with the offensive line play? I mean, it feels like, again, that was continuing from the spring through the spring game. Everybody knows where the offensive line is.
Right. No, it's just an extension of what we saw all spring, really, with that. And I thought it was interesting that later he was answering another question. He was talking about what we'll probably talk about in the third segment, and it is the consistency that they saw from the secondary. That today was also a replication of what they saw day in and day out in the spring from the secondary. And he said, if you only saw it like 1 or 2 times, then maybe you wouldn't give it that much credence. But we saw it every day, and I think so. In a microcosm of that. It's why those few early possessions, which weren't even full contact possessions, by the way. So it's kind of a different kind of football that's being played in the early stages of the spring game. Okay, the tackles did all right there, but over time, who won out? And it's the side of the ball that has a clear talent edge right now. Now there is a talent edge, so that's a reality, but it's a reality Ohio State has to confront, because the guys that Ohio State has on defense are good, but none of them have proven themselves to be like definite first round no-brain guys right yet. And they're going to see some of those guys over the course of a season, or see guys at least at this level. So all these candidates still have some work to do this summer. Again, it's that Ohio State standard that we talk about all the time. Like, somebody's going to win the job, whatever. Are they winning the job, and are they performing?
I think it remains on the table that it's not necessarily that to look in the transfer portal for a guy who lost a job battle somewhere, but if somebody who's a good player and is a starting player at a good team just decides to go in the portal for some reason, I think they have to stay on the lookout for that. I don't think anything changed about the way the offensive line played Saturday. I think we continue. If you've listened to any Buckeye Talks at all since spring practice started, we're the same place, which is, well,
since like 2021. Like we saw this coming. We saw this coming a while back.
That's true. Since the beg Paris Johnson to return idea at left tackle did not work out.
Clearly.
Paris Johnson was there, by the way, hanging out. Okay, so I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on the offensive line because what we've talked about, I think everybody saw. Steven.
Can we real quick, though?
Yeah.
It was important that Paris Johnson was there, right, Steven? Because let's just touch on recruiting real quick. Like, there was an important guy there today. That, I mean, we spent so much time talking about how offensive tackle recruiting is a disaster. I think this is worth slipping in who was there and why it's important.
Oh, yeah. David Sanders, the number 2 player in the 2025 class, 5-star tackle, top tackle in that class, was here today. He has been, I guess, I don't want to say trying to get here, but he has been linked to visiting Ohio State in the past, especially last fall, and it just never really worked out and never happened. And so there was some word that maybe he'd come this time, but it's like until you see that kid in Columbus, you don't really bank on it. So he did show up today and was here on a visit. He was here with his entire family, and as he's walking down the ramp, there's this ramp that all the recruits walk down when they're coming to football games. It's him, it's the guy who's hosting him, and it's Paris Johnson. Ironically enough, the last 5-star top tackle, top 10 recruit in the country that Ohio State got. And Paris is, I mean, we guys know Paris. He's a pretty talkative, pretty lovable guy. And he is walking Sanders around all over the place, and they're side by side and they're hip by hip. And really, he didn't hand him off until Jeremiah Smith, the top wide receiver, number 2 player in the country, and Aaron Nolan, top 100 quarterback commit, until they walked in, and then they were hip with him. But in my opinion, David Sanders is the most important Ohio State target right now in the 2025 class because of all the misses in the offensive tackle recruiting. And that's a guy from North Carolina. He goes to the same school that Jaden Davis was at in North Carolina. I think it's called Providence Day. That's a big-time guy. That is the ultimate Justin Fry is here to fix your offensive line recruiting, because that's a 5-star kid that by year 2, you expect him to be a 2-year starter at left tackle for you. And the fact that he's here on a day when the guy you just sent out of here as a 5-star recruit who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, top 15 pick, is building up a strong relationship with him. I mean, that's a vital picture that might have some payoff 2 years from now if this kid actually commits here.
And Sanders, according to reports, has been to Georgia multiple times.
Yes.
But Georgia also had its spring game Saturday, and he was in Columbus, not Athens. So this was a good opportunity for Ohio State to get a chance to make its case. Okay, let's move to, you mentioned Jeremiah Smith, a leader in the 2024 class. So let's talk about receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr. plays the first 2 series. They're not doing full tackling those series with the ones. He has 3 catches for 62 yards. He's like a one-man offense. He's more open than anybody else on the field is all day. Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming are out. They do not play. Xavier Johnson is out. He does not play. So most of the game, and when Marvin Harrison was out there too, it was Jaden Ballard and Carnell Tate were with Marvin Harrison Jr. And then once Marvin left, Caleb Brown was out there a lot. I guess maybe they moved some other guys around. But it was a first-team offense that Kyle McCord was running without first-team receivers. So the tackles have to get fixed because as it stands right now, the guys who were playing tackle Saturday are the guys who are going to be playing tackle in the fall unless they bring in a transfer. The guys playing receiver with Kyle McCord on Saturday were not the guys that are going to be playing with Kyle McCord in the fall. Because once Marvin left, it was none of them. And it wasn't even X who's driving around on a scooter with his foot in a boot. So, Steven, like, how much do you think that contributed to any of the angst around quarterback play? Because, you know, the 3 throws to Marvin looked pretty good, and then all of a sudden the separation wasn't there for most of the day otherwise.
Yeah, I think there's a balance to it because you do want your quarterback to elevate the talent around you, but I don't know if you can ask a quarterback to do that at this stage. Like, I don't know, could we have asked C.J. Stroud, hey, you just lost Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, but can you still go out there and throw a bunch of good passes and throw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns and win a game? He probably wouldn't have done that. But obviously, by the time we get to the Utah game, when he is down 2 of those guys, he was ready to do something like that. And obviously, the year after that, when Jackson goes down again, I don't think you can ask that, especially when you add in the offensive line problems that they had. And so there is a gap between Ohio State starting wide receivers and their bench guys right now, really in a way that I don't think we've seen in the Hartline era. There's not a Garrett Wilson or a Jackson Smith-Njigba or a Marvin Harrison who's just like, oh, he doesn't play because the dudes in front of him are just that good. Like, these guys don't play right now because of the guys in front of them are that good, but also they're just not at that level yet. And so what you ended up getting a lot of times is, of those 34 passes, how many of those incompletes were because a wide receiver didn't create separation and Denzel Burke's just a better player, and so Denzel Burke just knocks it down? Or Davis and Igbinosun was so physical at the line of scrimmage that a young wide receiver didn't know what to do with it, and so it ends up being an incomplete pass. Or even Jordan Hancock or Jair Brown. It wasn't until Nathan's already said it, it wasn't until the fourth quarter where we saw even Cardinal Tate, even though he caught that touchdown pass, it took up to the fourth quarter for us to really see separation on any of those go balls in a way that led to a touchdown pass. And that's why Ryan Day liked it so much. He liked the way that Cardinal Tate created separation, but he also liked what Kyle McCord did and hadn't touched on that ball. But it takes both of those two things. So maybe Kyle didn't see it as good as maybe he should have, but also the picture, as Ryan Day said, the picture wasn't as clear at times as it needed to be. And that's a result of your 5th best receiver is now your number 1 receiver and on down the board. Everybody's moving up 4 or 5 spots.
And the protection was good on that play too. But McCord was kind of walking us through everything that happened right. But the important thing there was McCord said, well, it was the first play of the fourth quarter, so we got to talk like extra time and look at like, oh, this is the exact look we want to get. If we get it, this is what's going to be there. And that's good. You'll have times to do that. But I just think it's much more instructive what happens when it's just rolling and you don't get to maybe think it through and set it up that well in the moment. You have to kind of rely on muscle memory. You have to rely on, something you saw in a film study 2 weeks before that you have to recall and make it work. And again, very lofty standard to be expecting a one-game starter barely throws any passes as a backup guy to live up to. Would be an even higher standard to ask Devin Brown to live up to. That's the standard that's going to be there on September 2nd.
And as we kind of noted, or people were talking about, Ohio State didn't have those guys, didn't have their guys at the end of the Georgia game. They didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr. They didn't have Cade Stover. They already didn't have Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams, and they're playing some of their backup guys against the Georgia defense. And so I think we can slide to the other side of this. The Ohio State defense had a good day, and the Ohio State defense, Nathan, had a good spring. And that's also part of this. And so, Stephen, you made a good point, right? The gap between the 1s and the 2s for the receivers is probably bigger than it's been in a while. So those 2s for the receivers that we saw basically all day, maybe not the normal 2s you'd see from the receivers. Meanwhile, they're going up against the 1s for the Ohio State defense, especially in the secondary. Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock, Josh Proctor, Lathan Ransom, Cam Martinez. They didn't have their first-team linebackers out there, but they have Cody Simon and C.J. Hicks. The defense is a chunk of this, Nathan, and that's like the good side of this. And you said, Ryan Day said it. They've talked positively about the corners, and again, I feel like the coaches, thank you to Ohio State for all the things we got to see, because I think they prepped the media and the media prepped the fans that I think Saturday you were ready for a lot of what you saw. And one of those big things, Nathan, is an improved defense led by potentially a very improved secondary.
I think the thing that struck me, and my duties today were to focus on McCord for the most part, but the thing that struck me was when I saw just how confident guys are playing in this defense right now, and not just at the line of scrimmage. We saw it last year at the line of scrimmage. Like you can't play with much more confidence than Tommy Eichenberg played with last year. Like just a bat out of hell on a lot of plays. But like Denzel Burke, like just being a dude and like show. I guess I'll use that term. He looked kind of dudeish today. Like we suspected he had dude in him, and we'll see if that translates to the fall. And I know you had a good conversation with him, Doug, that I think will illuminate that. But like just the confidence with which he was making plays. CJ Hicks had a good day today, and he only got elevated because Steel Chambers is also out and still on crutches today. And I don't know that it like starts a starting controversy necessarily, but when forced into a first string situation and getting all that opportunity, I thought he looked really good out there at times. We saw some flashes from some of the safeties. Like it just the whole defense feels a little bit more confident. And I think some of that is individual progression. I think some of it also is just the natural. A year ago at this time and even into the season, they're still in a learning process. And now a lot of that just the defense feels a lot more facile right now. They just swim in it a little easier.
We did not get to talk to Jim Knowles afterward, but Ryan Day was saying like vanilla defense didn't blitz at all. So you have to take that into account. So if there's questions about the offensive line, it's not that they were confused, that they weren't blocking guys. Steven, you were watching the defense when you weren't writing recruiting stories in the midst of the spring game. We do this. We do post-game videos where we always give a grade to the quarterback play. If we had done that, Steven, if we were saying, Steven, you watch the defense, grade the Ohio State defense as an entire unit, 1s, 2s, and 3s, what would you give them for Saturday?
I think I'd give them an A-. And I don't want to give them a strict A because I think what we saw this spring is the floor get raised on all three levels, whether it be linebacker, just because CJ Hicks got a lot of reps these last couple of weeks, a couple of practices with Steel Chambers being out, and it just feels like it's starting to click. Can he do it consistently now? And then now we'll see what the future holds. But I thought I saw a lot of stuff today where it's like, that's going to be real fun to look at in 2024 when he's finally a starting linebacker here. Sonny Styles was doing things where it's like, yeah, I don't know if Josh Parker's going to be able to keep him off the field. I thought, the defensive line, my call is he's not blockable. And it doesn't matter if it's Donovan Jackson and Matthew Jones or it's 2s or 3s. He's just not blockable. When we saw Kenyatta Jackson, I thought he had some good moments when he flashed. Caden Curry flashed. Amari Abor flashed. Hero Kanu even flashed. He had that sack at the end of the first half where I thought started to feel like, okay, some depth in that interior might get built by the time we get to the fall. And then obviously the secondary, we've been hearing about them literally every week of spring practice, and now the public got to see it. And every time we've gotten our eyes on them, it's backed up everything that we've been hearing. Getting their hands on balls, Denzel Burke finally being healthy and getting back on track, Jordan Hancock getting to flash his talent, the way Davison Igbinosun has raised the level of competition in that room, Jair Brown and the way he's come along. I thought Ryan Turner even had a pretty solid day, and I thought Cam Martinez had a really solid day as well. Everything seemed to be clicking in a way that, like I said, the floor has been raised. Now fall camp, can we get that ceiling up? Because as we're talking about with the quarterbacks and the offensive line parts, the better this defense is, the less pressure it puts on this offense to feel like it has to be the best possible version of itself week in and week out, because we see it every year. There's going to come a week where the offense just doesn't have it. I don't care who the quarterback is or who the wide receiver is. And when those moments happen, can the defense do enough to keep Ohio State from losing the football game? And what I've seen through 15 practices, I think they're headed in that direction.
I don't think I gave the texter answers on the final poll question about, is it Kyle McCord? You're basically ready to give him the job. You think it's still split, or do you really want to see Devin Brown? Right? I don't think I ever gave what the texters actually voted, and we've been getting more votes rolling in. 45% say it's Kyle McCord. You're basically ready to give him the job. 41% say still split, open battle continues. Only 14% say I really want to see Devin Brown. So that's less than half the respondents saying give it to Kyle McCord, but it is Kyle McCord winning a plurality, right? It's Kyle McCord ahead of wide open. So that's interesting, right? This is generally people are not hitting the pit. These are the dedicated, educated, most loyal, locked-in fans, and people did not watch that and say, oh. People watched it and said, it was good, it was fine, I still feel pretty good about it. He's the guy, it's okay. That was the biggest vote we got, even if it wasn't over 50% when you combine all the different questions we asked. So I think in the end, and I want to do a play calling thing before we go, but in the end, Nathan, did it feel like, hey, this is how a team that with national championship aspirations should end spring, right? And again, obviously, every time somebody does something good, it might mean the guy opposite him did something not as well because you're on the same team. But the defense getting better is a pretty good sign for this team in the spring, I think.
Did Ohio State end the spring the way it should? You didn't have any long-term injuries happen this spring. It doesn't sound like, so that's important. But I don't think a team with national championship aspirations is worried about both of its tackle spots at the end of the spring. Like, no, I don't think that. I think that a team with national championship aspirations in the modern day would like a little bit more buzz about how the quarterbacks are playing. That's different than the confidence that the staff apparently has in them long term. But there was buzz out of Stroud, I thought, a little bit in 21, that he'd separated a little bit. And then, maybe, this, we kind of see it. Maybe it's coming. And yeah, he stumbled a little bit to start that year, but we saw what it eventually was. So I don't know if I'm ready to say that. That doesn't mean this spring was a failure, but there were, to some extent, some of the questions that they had to answer this spring were not going to be answerable in 6 weeks. Like 6 weeks probably doesn't turn Zen Mahalski switching from left to right tackle and Tiger Shabola moving from guard to tackle, turn that guy into a no doubt starter. Like that was probably still going to be open at the end of the spring. So there's some questions that we're just probably going to have to carry into the preseason regardless.
I think I walk away on this spring. Brian Hartline said something during the coaches clinic on Friday when they were doing their chalk talk that I thought really stuck with me. A couple of people did. Corey didn't say this well, but Brian, he talked about the wide receiver play and how he's a wide receiver coach. So some of this is just him caping for his position, but he thinks the wide receivers are the most important position on an offense because the better your wide receivers are, the better everybody else is. If your wide receivers are getting open in 0.7 seconds, it doesn't matter if your offensive line is back. It's not blocking that long. If your wide receivers are taking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds to get open and your quarterback's standing back there looking like his head is cut off and you have a bad offensive line, he's probably getting sacked a bunch of times. So I think about that when we watched the spring game and when we watched other practices and we talk about how the separation really wasn't being created the same way and it felt like the defensive line was dominating the offensive line. I come out of this spring really hoping we get some level of this type of access in the fall camp, just so I can see when these two quarterbacks have every weapon that they're going to have on an actual game day, how much that impacts everything else in the offense. Because then I feel like we can get a real read on everything. How good this secondary can be, how good this defensive line is, these linebackers, but most importantly, how good these quarterbacks can be when they're playing with Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, Xavier Johnson, Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, and not the 4 or 5 guys who are behind all those names I just mentioned.
I can't remember who I used to say this about. Was it Justin Fields when I would say, well, all this, whatever's like, it doesn't matter. Justin will solve it. Was that who I would say that about?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it's possible exactly what you're saying, Stephen, right? That, well, this and this, and it's like, if you have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So then here's the thing that's on the table. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the best receiver in college football if he's healthy. And some people, if you go to a list, will put Emeka Egbuka as the second best receiver in college football right now. The spring game might have shown us this, that as long as the Ohio State defense is not facing Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, they are very good. And they probably aren't going to face them because they're on their team. Yes. And I don't know how many teams have a receiver combo and a quarterback who can get them the ball that would be close. I don't know. And when you give the Ohio State offense those two guys, and Julian also, you solve a lot of the things that didn't look great on Saturday. So on the one hand, it's like, well, okay, then maybe the Ohio State defense isn't so great if they were only doing it against Ohio State's second-team receivers. It's like, well, a lot of other teams, their receivers are kind of like Ohio State's second-team receivers. Or at the very least, nobody has Marv.
Yeah.
So Marv, as long as there's no Marv, Ohio State defense, in good shape. And when you give the Ohio State offense Marv, Ohio State offense, good shape. So then you can look at Saturday and say, oh, no, we're fine. Because the defense is not going to face Marv, and the offense is going to have Marv. Problems solved. I think it's really important for this Ohio State defense to have a good spring, Nathan. Like, if we had come out of this and been like, I don't know, man. Kyle McCord threw 4 touchdowns on Saturday, but 3 of them were on blown coverages where guys fell down or conked their heads together like coconuts. We'd be freaking out. It didn't happen.
No, there were even a couple.
They got
times,
better.
Yeah, there were even a couple times on Saturday where there was a throw in Denzel Burke's area that he broke up or whatever, and I was like, oh, you can't be doing that. And that was not what we were saying when people threw the ball at Denzel Burke last year. For long chunks of the year, it was rough. And but it sounds like his head's in the right places, which means his body is more consistently in the right place. And it's just little by little, you can see where it builds up right there. But the defense is not as dependent on one player as the offense is. So it's been a collection of talent that's coming along on defense that leads you to a certain amount of optimism. And we know there's a good collection of on offense too when you start talking about receivers and running backs and Cade Stover. But it's still very dependent on that one guy getting to that level when you start talking about who's in the Final Four, who's playing for a national championship.
Denzel Burke and Cody Simon, the only other 2 players who came out to talk after the spring game other than Devin Brown and Kyle McCord. Denzel Burke talking about he's in a good place from a health standpoint. He feels confident. He said this was the most fun he's had, like the whole spring. This was the most fun he's had because he just feels locked in. And I said, does that mean this is the best football you've played this spring? And he was like, no, because he thinks when he's healthy, this is what he's done and this is what he has done. So the real, and we've talked about it a ton, right? I mean, the real thing to him is he said he's taking care of business off the field. He feels locked in. He feels very good about Tim Walton. Very, very good about Tim Walton as his position coach. But the number one thing for him in his mind is he's healthy. So he thinks when he's healthy, this is what he does. But I think you add where he is from a mental standpoint, and it feels like what you saw, what he feels, he put on the field. So we all saw it. Hard to throw on that guy on Saturday. Last thing. Brian Hartline calling plays. Ryan Day did have a headset on. But Ryan Day did not have a play sheet, as he said. Brian Hartline did have a play sheet. Ryan Day was standing behind the offense a lot, like right behind the quarterback for that view. Between plays, Ryan Day would talk with the offense. But when the offense was gathering on the sideline, like, hey, this series just ended, now we're going on the field, Brian Hartline was in the middle of that. So, Nathan, I did think we did see Ryan Day detached, more detached than we would have seen a year ago. But also he's in there, talking with Kyle McCord, talking with Kristen Gebbia. And there was something that came up because I've been very big on this with the idea of I think it's not the best for the team for Ryan Day to spend all his time with the offense. And when they had the coaches clinic roundtable on Thursday night with John Cooper, Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day, Kirk Herbstreit asked him, like, hey, how did you split it up? And Jim Tressel was like, I never went to a defensive meeting. I didn't even know who the defensive players were. He didn't say that. But Jim Tressel was like, I never.
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said they didn't tell me where they meet. Like they didn't want them around those meetings.
So, and he's talking about he has Mark D'Antonio, who he completely believes in. He has Jim Haycock, who he has Luke Fickell, right? So he has these great people that he believes in. And I've just had enough little conversations here and there with Ryan Day over the course of trying to figure out what he's going to do here, that there's a part of me that it's been such a thing of Ryan, you can't only coach the offense. Come on. You can't only coach the offense. And then he's on the stage and Jim Tressel's like, I only coach the offense. And I thought maybe Ryan Day was going to look out in the crowd and be like, are you serious? He didn't coach. He had nothing to do with the defense for 10 years. And you guys are making me give up play calling after 4. What are we doing here? So I did think that was interesting. And then we cannot evaluate this. We do not have enough information. Watching them run the plays they ran with their second string receivers in a spring game, we cannot evaluate it. But what we saw, Nathan, I don't know, it didn't seem great. There wasn't a lot of flow to it, and didn't Ryan Day afterward talk about how they've got to take shots down the field? That's what their offense is about. And they took a couple early where the throws were not very good, and then they hit the Carnell Tate one late. But they weren't doing a ton of that. They were handing off a lot. There were quarterbacks. They took a lot of checkdowns. Let me double check how many passes the backs caught. But that was all checkdowns, which like Ryan Day wants them to take checkdowns. But Dallin Hayden had 5 receptions. Chip Trainum had 2. So, they're throwing to the backs because they can't, somebody's not open or they don't believe they can make, hit the window down the field. So I don't know, Nathan. We can't draw any conclusions about the play calling handoff based on Saturday, but it wasn't like that was an Ohio State offense that was humming along.
No, and I would say a heavier lean on the checkdowns when Jebbia was in there. He's been very like consistent through practice. Like I don't feel like the ball hits the ground a lot with him, but it's a lot of short check down, game management kind of stuff, I think, from him. And we saw that again today. You got to remember, Brian Hartline has less experience as a play caller than Kyle McCord does as a starting quarterback. Like he's actually done it in a real game. So this is still kind of a project that's in its infancy. And it happens so publicly that it will be awkward, maybe a little, if Ryan just decides, not yet. I'm calling plays this year. We'll fold this into something Brian does next year or something like that. But again, it's where that kind of ruthlessness comes in too a little bit. It's like, as much as it's the better decision in the long run, it's probably easier to call plays with C.J. Stroud than it is with what you're going to have at quarterback this year, or that it was to call plays with C.J. Stroud in his first year as opposed to his second year. So I'm still open to the idea that this is something they're trying. I'm also open, though, that like it's April 15th. It's 4 months until August 15th, my birthday, by the way. But then you're like starting preseason camp, basically. Like you're early in preseason camp. So they've got 4 months to build this thing and work on things like the concepts of play calling. Now that you can't work with your guys on a daily basis as far as skill development and stuff, it gets to be more of an emphasis now in these next 4 months.
Yeah, it's hard to gauge it when you're not really sure what they were trying to get done out there. So I can't even.
That's the other part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I think. I do think, Nathan, you made a point that I was going to touch on. This may have been easier to do last year when you had C.J. Stroud who knew what he was doing. There's a lot of new that's like going on with this offense this spring. It's new quarterback, new play caller, new offensive line, and none of the guys you can rely on are here this spring. Brian, go learn how to call some plays. I don't think that's a realistic thing to ask him to be able to do. So I thought it was boring. Like you thought it was boring, Doug, but I just thought it was a boring spring game in general. Like nothing was. If I was sitting out in that hot sun, I'd have been like, I want my $5 back, but it's $5, so it is. It is what it is. I can't get a gauge on Brian Hartline, the play caller, until they play Indiana, because then you're going to see what his flow and what his rhythm is like. But also, you just kind of know what they're trying to get done on a given series, just how they're doing stuff.
You can't say to Brian Hartline, Brian, what's up with this Tristan Jebbia, Noah Rogers offense? Why isn't it clicking yet? It's like, what are we talking about? Like,
it's like, who cares?
So, yeah. So it's the spring game, but it's 75,000 people, and we want to get the best read that we can. A lot of Buckeyes back around. Paris Johnson, Garrett Wilson was there. JT Barrett was there. And I just happened to run into a young woman in the elevator who was wearing a T-shirt with JT Barrett's face on it. And it almost looked like JT Barrett was doing like the Step Brothers pose. It looked like a school picture. He had like his chin on his hand and he was kind of being cheesy on purpose. And I think she said she bought it at a thrift store, but it was like a homage shirt that they had made. And she said it was like a limited edition JT. And I was like, what? There's a company making a limited edition JT Barrett posing like he's in like his engagement photo T-shirt. Nathan's like, no, I'm aware of this.
There may have. I mean, who knows what like some bootleg thing that got made in 2000 whatever that was profiting off JT Barrett before NIL. There was a bylaw passed a couple years ago, I believe, that allowed schools to start doing things like that with former players, I think, or that preceded NIL. But
anyway, So she's wearing the shirt, and I'm like, oh, man, where'd you get that shirt? She's like, oh, I got it in the thrift store. And I said, well, he's here. Because they had someone, like, he and Cardale Jones were, like, walking around signing autographs and stuff. And she's like, oh, my God. I was like, you should go get a photo of you in your JT Barrett shirt with JT Barrett. And then, like, she got, like, all her face color. I was like, so then, like, she followed me down on the field. She worked for the Big Ten Network or something, so she had a pass. And so we went over to JT Barrett, and I said, hey, JT, what's up? And then I was talking to her for a little bit, and I said, hey, your biggest fan is here. So then JT Barrett took a photo of the woman wearing the JT Barrett shirt. So now I said, you should make a shirt of the photo of you and JT with you wearing the JT shirt, right? Then it would be like that long snapper guy where you just have the shirt into infinity. But of note on JT Barrett, wearing blue, Detroit Lions blue, likes coaching in the NFL, he said. So I think he's like an assistant quarterbacks coach with the Lions. I said, like, what do you want to do? And he said, you know, like, I want to do this, but he didn't say, oh, I want to be a college offensive coordinator in 3 years. It feels like maybe he wants to stay in the NFL. So I was just curious, because if he had said, oh, I'd love to get back here, it'd be like, sound the alarm, right? So how does JT Barrett get back on this staff?
I'm just looking for ways to kick Corey Dennis out of the quarterback room.
Well, no, I mean, once Corey's like the head coach at Texas or something, then Corey is a nice guy. Corey is very nice to me. Corey is very nice to everybody.
Yeah.
But if I get Kenny Guyton or JT Barrett here, come on, man, what are we doing? Like, come on, what am I doing here? So I mean, you got to be with. So JT just a pleasant fellow, and but I was curious because I'm always on alert. Like if they're because sometimes you do. Sometimes guys have a preference, Steven, right? Whether you want to be a college coach, whether you be an NFL coach. He didn't say for sure, and he would take any great job he could get, I'm sure. But he kind of indicated that he likes coaching in the NFL.
I mean, they are two very different jobs, right? One is kind of seasonal work, I guess you can say, and the other one you have to live. You have to live being a college football coach. You don't ever get to turn that off, because if you're not coaching your players, then you're trying to get other players to come be your next players, and it's I don't know. I don't. It feels like NFL is a long game, while college football is more of a young man's game. But that's just me speaking as a person who's never coached at any of those levels. Anyway, not a lot of former players here this time around. It just wasn't.
There have been times when there's been a gazillion. Yeah.
I mean, my best friend was here, but that's all that really matters to me. But there was not a lot of guys.
That's your best friend.
That was a good crowd, though.
Just because you saw them at a gas station. Steven saw Garrett Wilson at a gas station. They pumped gas together.
We did.
Yeah, there are times, and Luke Whippler was here too. I don't know if Jackson was here, and I don't think CJ was here because CJ's in California, I think.
Correct.
But there are times back in the day, I would always go crazy at the spring game trying to get numbers for all the guys who were going into the draft, because back before everything was on Twitter and people put out press releases like, can I call you for 4 minutes when you get drafted so that I can get 3 quotes from you? And so it usually was all the NFL guys were back in the spring game. So the only other thing I saw before game, the linebackers were huddled, like the last thing they did before they ran into the locker room, before they came out for good. And James Laurinaitis was in the middle of the huddle with the linebackers, and Jim Knowles was standing off to the side by himself. So it doesn't mean that Jim Knowles is not the coach. And when they had a chalk breakdown for the different position group sessions, Jim Knowles was doing it for linebackers, and then James Laurinaitis was doing it for part of the time for linebackers too. So it's like we just keep talking about, like, James Laurinaitis he's more than whatever his actual title is. He's right at the heart of the linebackers and that kind of thing. Okay. Steven, anything else we want to throw in here before we let these poor people listen to this podcast and get back to their lives?
No, I think we covered it all. There might be a couple other, remnants of this recruiting momentum that continue to flow over the next couple of weeks here. But other than that, yeah, spring football's over. Okay. We're headed into May, where it might get quiet for a little bit, and before you know it, you'll blink and it'll be camp season.
And the transfer portal is open. Bear Alexander from Georgia, who's a 5-star recruit at defensive tackle, who people thought was the next in line of great Georgia defensive tackles, reportedly is putting his name in the portal. Then I saw someone speculating that maybe he's just like trying to get a little NIL money out of Georgia. I don't know what that is. But the point of it, Nathan, is the portal is open and you don't know who's going to go in there. And so will Ohio State desperately grab anybody in there? No, they're actually probably going to have to lose a few guys because they're over on numbers right now. Yep. But will they be very alert to unexpected additions at key positions? You would think so, Nathan. So people need, and not everybody's finished their spring game. A bunch of teams had their spring game on Saturday. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Florida State, a bunch of big teams did. Michigan's already done. A bunch of teams have it next Saturday, though. So you're not going to have the full picture, right? But that is something, Nathan, that could be popping in the next couple of weeks. There's a possibility Ohio State adds somebody.
Yeah, Ohio State's at 89 scholarships right now. Got to be down to 85 by August. So we know they're going to lose a handful of people. It's just I sent a text this afternoon or Saturday afternoon and just reminded people again, you're going to see, don't think every offensive lineman from a Power 5 team that comes into the portal is a fit for Ohio State. They need tackles very specifically, and they've got to be at a clearly better standard than what they have now. And just because the guys they have aren't playing at the level that we're used to at Ohio State doesn't mean that anybody can just come in and beat them out. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. But then also like those guys, like the Bear Alexander is interesting because like defensive line is not a need really for Ohio State. Like they like the guys they have, but it's the kind of guy that you couldn't turn down if you wanted to come here. So just keep those things in mind too, that it's positional fit is sometimes critical. And then sometimes it's just, well, how could you not take him?
All right, that'll wrap it up for this edition of Buckeye Talk. We'll be back on Monday. That's the plan. And then we have some stuff planned for next week where we're going to go turn our lens to somewhere where we haven't turned our lens lately. We'll let you know more about that, but you can keep trying to text if you want to join up, 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial. Certainly go to cleveland.com/OSU to read our stories. Make sure you're subscribed to Buckeye Talk so you don't miss any episodes. But that's it for spring football. We're still going to write about spring football, but they're not going to practice anymore. So thanks to you guys for hanging in with us during this part of the Ohio State football season for now. For Nathan Baird and Stephen Means, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Buckeye Talk.